All right, fam. Now for our next story of the day. Bitcoin could hit $1 million per coin if the United States buys just 1 million Bitcoin, according to this recent research report published by the Bitcoin Policy Institute. And you could run the math. What if, hypothetically, we were to purchase 5 million Bitcoin, because that's what Max Kaiser and Saylor proposed to the Trump administration, to acquire literally 25% of the circulating Bitcoin supply, which would be 5 million Bitcoin. Now, on a low end, if we only were to do 1 million, which is what Cynthia Lummis's bill proposes for the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve for the United States in the executive order in which Trump put his John Hancock on, but let's entertain this. The Bitcoin Policy Institute executive floated a 1 million Bitcoin price scenario if the U.S. were to buy 1 million BTC. Now, in a Bitcoin Magazine podcast, Zach Shapiro, the head of the policy for the Bitcoin Focus BPI, said, I think, Tank, that a 1 million Bitcoin purchase by the U.S. would have a massive impact on the price of the asset. And I agree. And I'll tell you why I believe it's so significant after I first quote him. If the United States announces we are buying 1 million Bitcoin, that's just a global seismic shock. Think first. Bitcoin price goes through the roof. Agreed. It'd create a supply shock. I think we'd probably go very quickly to something like $1 million per coin. Exactly my thinking, because no other country wants to be left on the back burner or get left behind. And there's only enough Bitcoin for one country to become the Bitcoin superpower. Will it be the United States acquiring 1 to 5 million Bitcoin? Will it be China? Will it be Russia? Will it be the UAE? You guys let me know your thoughts. The discussion followed President T's, which is the new nickname for President Trump by Bukele, executive order establishing the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve and a digital asset stockpile for the shitcoin area, of course. BPI Executive Director Matthew Pines said that the other nations are watching how the U.S. positions itself with Bitcoin before formulating their own strategies. The executive added that holding more Bitcoin aligns with Trump's promise to make the U.S. a Bitcoin superpower. That's right, quoting Pines here. If Donald Trump, a.k.a. President T, wants to make good on his promise to be a Bitcoin superpower, that ultimately comes down to how much Bitcoin you have. This is a measure of how much the United States is making good on the rhetorical objective. That's right. To sum that up, Bitcoin is the ultimate IQ test. Let's see how smart the United States truly is. Trump's executive order also directs the Treasury and Commerce Secretaries to develop budget-neutral strategies for acquiring more of the BITI to expand the reserve without additional taxpayer burden. There's a lot of ways to do this. You can do this with the tariffs. You can do this by trading the gold derivatives, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of ways to acquire that Bitcoin without using the taxpayer dollars to make it accessible and viable. Now, on March 12th, Senator Lummis reintroduced the Boosting Innovation, Technology, and Competitiveness through the Optimized Investment Nationwide Act. Good Lord, that's a long one. Acronym, we can just say Bitcoin Act, to push the U.S. holdings above 1 million per pair little bitty. That's right. Pines also suggests to acquire the Bitcoin in a budget-neutral fashion, floating the idea of using tariff revenues to buy Bitcoin and other potential ways for the U.S. government to purchase more of the BTC. Revenues that the government can use to acquire more Bitcoin would be the things like tariff revenue or other fees that the government collects that are not tax-based fees. This could include royalties from oil and gas leases, sales of federal land, physical gold, and other digital assets. And in fact, Saylor probably already proposed at least a few dozen ways to the Trump administration to acquire gold using these net neutral ways. And on April 2nd, Trump imposed the 10% baseline tariff on all imports from all countries through the executive order. The president's order also included reciprocal tariffs for countries that charge tariffs on U.S. imports. However, the administration's evolving tariff policy has created an ongoing market uncertainty, which is typically not good for risk on assets like the pretty little bitty, and hence why we have had extreme volatility since then and most likely going to continue to have. But what are your thoughts, fam? Let me know. I'm going to read your comments out loud. Personally, I think a 1 million price prediction, if the U.S. were to announce making it official and purchasing 1 million Bitcoin, I think we can rip to multiple 6-7 figures, easy peasy. And even more advantageous than that, if they were to propose 2, 3, 4, 5 million Bitcoin acquisition, think of it that way. Like I said, only one country is going to be able to get the first mover's advantage to establish becoming the Bitcoin superpower of the world. And currently North Korea is leading the U.S. because they hold more Bitcoin due to their Lazarus group than the United States. In fact, the United States is approximately holding 200,000 Bitcoin, which has not been audited, by the way. Trump saying they wanted to, but I haven't seen nothing yet. But they're theoretically holding 200,000 Bitcoin, but 100,000 of those Bitcoin belong to Bitfinex, meaning the U.S. government really only holds roughly 100,000, which belongs to them, which they achieve through seizing it ultimately. So how it works is criminals seize the Bitcoin from the exchanges or whatever the honeypots are, and then the government seizes the Bitcoin from the criminals. So it's like criminals seizing Bitcoin from criminals, drug traffickers, anti-money laundering, tax avoidance. And if you don't know, now you know. And that's a wrap. It's going up forever, JV. Precisely. Wu-Tang. Wu-Tang.